Welcome, everyone, to our webinar on optimizing your digital velocity, maximizing your efficiency, minimizing complexity across your digital channels. My name is Garrett Model, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Acquia. And we're excited to have three experts joining myself today. Just before we get started, some quick housekeeping items, just to make sure you guys understand. We do have some Q&A available to you guys in your own individual portals. Feel free to ask us questions. We're going to try to incorporate them as we chat with our panelists. We are going to be recording this session, so it will be hosted on demand on acquia.com for your viewing pleasure after this. But let's just kind of get started. I'd love to first kind of introduce our panelists. We have an amazing crew today joining us from Acquia and FFW. We have John Bauer, who is our partner manager. We've got Matthew Grasmick, who is our director of product at Acquia, and then we've got Ray Saltini, who's a director of solutions and consulting at FFW. Thank you all for joining us today. I would love to, kind of get some details on each of you guys for our guests that are joining us. Maybe you can talk about, something that's some brief overview of your experiences, maybe some focus of what has driven you to work with Drupal and maybe Acquia itself, and maybe there's some unique challenges that you're seeing or facing in our today's industry. I'll go with you, Matt. Do you want to start us off first?
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here. I'm Matthew Grasmick. I'm a Senior Director of Product at Acquia with a focus on CMS strategy. And in terms of Drupal and Acquia history, I've been at Acquia over a decade, and I think I'm about to have my Drupalversary for 15 years later this month. I started out as someone actually building the websites and moved through a bunch of roles to end up in product. But what I really focus on today is the future of Drupal at Acquia and kind of out in the wild, something that's on my mind quite a lot and definitely relevant for the large landscape of fast-moving technologies.
Very cool. Ray, do you want to go next?
Sure. Ray Saltini, Director of Solutions and Consulting at FFW, a proud JAKALA company. I'm in my 13th year with the organization, my 19th year with Drupal. I've got the privilege of supporting a terrific team of consultants and architects across many digital channels, first and foremost through our work with digital experience platforms, focusing on experience and data. I've been working in digital with enterprise clients for a very long time, pretty much as far back as when we had to explain to folks what the World Wide Web was. I think I continue to be fascinated by the intersection between technical solutions and people, and how all technical solutions invariably begin and end with people. Thank you.
Very cool. Thank you, Ray. How about you, John?
Yeah, so John Bauer, partner manager at FFW, as Ray mentioned, now a proud JAKALA company. And I'm usually the outlier on panels like this. I started my career on the marketing communications side, but was always kind of the techie guy on the team, and moved my way into solutions and working with partners. And first started working with Acquia and Drupal several jobs ago, and was immediately drawn to the open source community and the passion that comes along with that. And it's been so much fun, watching Acquia evolve, Drupal evolve, and the community just be involved with making it the best platform possible. So it's really fun to talk about the platform in settings like this.
Well, thank you, all of you. I'm really excited to kind of get us started here. And I'd love to kind of maybe talk about, let's just get started. Let's talk about our cluttered tech stacks. We all know the struggle today. We know about the overflowing tool sets. We know the redundant features that we're seeing. We're seeing that we're having that nagging feeling of really kind of drowning in the complexity instead of really how we can make progress. Before this session, I was reading up on a recent Gartner survey that confirmed kind of the suspicions, and really kind of why we're driving into today's sessions. Around 95% of organizations are really weighed down by the more technology that they're leveraging, and really how they're not being able to leverage everything in its effective use. And it's like lugging around your gym membership, right? You really never use it. It has its good intentions, but it's really kind of hindering the results. And I think about this team today and how we're talking to you all. We are going to be your tech fitness kind of trainers and helping you guide you through this kind of optimizing your routine. We're going to be breaking it down, I think, from 2 levels. The tech diet, where we'll be helping you to identify and eliminate your redundancies, helping you to streamline your tech stacks for efficiency and agility. And then our second part is focused on the integration, and in the sense from an exercise perspective, where we are going to help shed the unnecessary weight or your systems, and really help to explore the strategic integrations that remain between your tooling, and really help to foster this seamless collaboration and help you to maximize your return on investment. So hopefully we won't break a sweat. Hopefully it's only from an intellectual sense, but we're going to tackle today's challenge, and hopefully it'll be a little bit leaner, a little bit meaner, and a little bit more effective. And so with that, I'd like to start this off on this kind of quest is how to optimize your tech systems. How do you guys all kind of recommend starting the process of identifying kind of this tech redundancies across our digital landscape today? And maybe John, I'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of tools out there that can help you both, official and unofficial, to audit your current tech staff. I mean, ideally, coming from the FFW standpoint, we'd love to have you work with a partner like us, and so we can actually take stock of everything you're using or underutilizing or not utilizing, and have some great ways of presenting that back to you and your team, so you can see that easy. But the reality is that you could really start just doing it, getting the spreadsheet together of everything that you're paying for. It's a great time to reach out to your accounts payable department and look at all those different services that you're currently paying for, which they will have a record of. And it's easy to lose track of that as you build, especially as technology has changed so much over the past 10, 20 years. But as you review what you find, make sure that you're actually utilizing the things that you're paying for, as well as all the features that are offered with each tool. And that's been something that's a big topic lately, as a lot of these platforms and tools are offering additional services. And if you're not keeping up with that, you may have a lot of things that you're not taking advantage of.
Makes a lot of sense. Maybe Ray or Matt. I combined both of you guys' names there.
You can call me Ray. Yeah, I mean, I think John, you make an excellent point. It's something we've chatted about many times in the past. And to John's point and to my statement earlier, I think it's helpful to think about technical management challenges as beginning and ending with people. And so, what I would say is reaching out to your account payable team, terrific. More likely they're going to be reaching out to you. That'll give you the data that you need around cost, right? But then you want to talk to as many stakeholders as possible, and then collect other data sets based on those conversations. So when they tell you something is invaluable or painful or aspirational, trust that feedback, right? But also verify everything you hear, because they're coming at it from a specific perspective. So, examine their narratives. Are they accurate? Are they complete? What parts overlap? This is just a great way to start surfacing unnecessary redundancies and differentiate them with something I think we often overlook, from feature sets that offer really important, valuable reinforcement. And Matt, the second part of my name there.
I think I'm going to take a slightly different angle. I think it's good to think about what are the internal tools we're using, of course, and the costs associated with that. I think my mind is usually on products and product management, and the users of the products. And I've spent plenty of time building tech stacks. And I think that's a valuable way to look at it too. So when you have a lot of technologies, redundant technologies, or not, when you stack a big stack together and you deliver that to an end user, whether it's in a mobile app or it's a website through Drupal or it's something else, that has real impacts too. Not just on them, it has impacts on your finances. So give you a couple examples. Like Walmart did a study that for every 1 second they reduced their page load time, they increased their conversion by 2%, which is many millions of dollars, obviously. AWS with Amazon.com found the same thing, that milliseconds of increased page load time translated into millions of dollars. It's kind of crazy to even think that we can perceive that. But there's a lot of value in taking a look at the experiences that you're sending to your end users and auditing them and saying, can I trim it down? And I think, at the risk of saying you can solve your tool problem with more tools, like I think I'm going to say that a few times. There's great tools for that, right? So, I mean, the really easy, accessible ones are just in your Chrome browser. Lighthouse is an old one. Actually, Google just introduced a new tool called Performance Insights. It kind of competes with their own Lighthouse tool that'll really break down from an experience level the perception of the speed of your product and help you kind of go piece by piece, like get rid of this Facebook pixel, get rid of this typekit loaded thing, get rid of this behavioral analytics thing that's loading in. And that stuff just really snowballs over time. And you don't make space to do that audit, you won't really notice it. So I think that's a great way to start auditing your redundancies.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think it shifts and changes based off of the priorities of the business. So we should always kind of constantly be looking at it. We talked a little bit about this kind of redundant tooling and the importance of trying to optimize this kind of tech ecosystem for productivity. I'd love to kind of explore and really kind of how we can unlock the power of collaboration for different platforms, and maybe what tools or techniques you guys all find the most effective for uncovering, integration opportunities between different platforms or even different teams. Or maybe pass that to John. John, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I think kind of to Matt's point, the tools that are available for that. I think the easiest way to uncover those opportunities too is to create something that is commonly called a SaaS system of record, and that can be anything from there's official tools like Vertice that do it. You could also be a spreadsheet utilizing tools like Lighthouse and things like that. But it really makes you take a look at the cost, the utilizations, even things like contract terms and the functions of each tool in that area. And that really gives you one source of truth to see, okay, here's everything that we're utilizing and here's what it could do. And then you can compare and contrast the functions of those tools. And when you see what overlaps, especially when it comes around paying for those different tools, you'll start to see areas where you can save money, but then also develop those efficiencies and create an argument for getting rid of stuff that certain people on your team may have an attachment to, but isn't super effective.
Yeah, I would agree with that, John, and I actually think Matt's point about using tools to monitor your tools, is indeed an important one, if not a little counterintuitive. I mean, there are also tools in different market segments. Vertis for mid-market. There's also Productive and Xylo for enterprise. Some of them also include security review or monitoring, and nowadays some of them also employ AI, and some of them actually do it well too. I think the cautionary tale here, though, is to not over leverage some of these great tools to the extent that we diminish the people factor. And I'll volunteering as the broken record to remind people to consider people in their tech stacks. One way to make sure you keep doing that is religion for us is actually literally create user stories for stakeholders around your tools. And so it kind of mirrors what you may be doing for your client base. And then we go through and we prioritize them right? And even go as far as to create acceptance criteria so you can all be aligned when it comes to decision making. And the priority setting is obviously huge. So
I like that. You guys talked a little bit about multiple tools, and I would say, in a situation where we're having multiple tools that are offering, similar functionality, what would some of the key factors that we should be looking at to help guide our decision to consolidate or even integrate?
Yeah, that's kind of the Achilles heel of the automated services or the tools to manage your tools, which they're certainly helpful, but this situation's becoming a lot more common because software just in general continues to add features and functionality. So sooner or later, things are going to overlap. But because of that, you have to think about several factors when you're making a decision. The first one is just making sure that the tools that you're using are the best, most efficient way to solve that problem. And in theory, it might seem really effective to bring everything under one umbrella as much as possible. I call that the Microsoft factor, which certainly makes sense from a revenue and a cost standpoint. But you also have to think about whether or not those tools that you're bringing in or those similar functionalities are actually effective. Additionally, to Ray's point, bringing up people again, can your team actually utilize those tools? Are they going to have to be retrained on something? Are the vendors that you're working with trained on those? Or are you going to have to look at a whole new vendor system or get them trained up on these tools? But really making sure that it saves you money, time, and also that human cost. Nobody wants to irritate their entire team by switching over to a new tool that's going to save pennies on the dollar. Think about the entire cost of those tools and what's the most effective.
yeah, that's so important, especially we all probably work with folks in IT departments, be they our own developers or otherwise, who are just stressed and stretched so thin. So, moving their cheese is sometimes not cool at all. Uh, but I think about the framework that John describes, and I think it's really smart. And I think to make the exercise even more productive, it's important for organizations to have a really clear understanding of what the definition of optimal is for them, for those organizations, and in particular how it differs from performance, right? Because they're two adjacent things, but they're really quite different, right? And this is a crucial step because it will help you in the next set of steps navigate conflicts between competing needs. And so, measuring performance is straightforward, right? It's like you have indicators for reliability, speed, security, resiliency, and of course, cost, right? But there's kind of a calculus, like a change management delta calculus to optimization that requires a really nuanced understanding of the impact of various changes and how they stack up against your organization's priorities. So you have to have clarity around what is optimal for your organization. It may not be what's optimal for this other organization or optimal for that, default configuration in whatever particular tool you use.
Yeah, I think I was going to say something similar. It's like, what are you optimizing for? Is the first question that you ask. A couple new thoughts though. One, I think it's good to recognize people have been optimizing for cost a lot lately. If you look particularly at SaaS and either B2C or B2B, there's been a SaaS depression basically starting in 2021, where the revenues cumulatively have gone down. There was even at least one, maybe 2 quarters where the net revenue across the board was negative for the SaaS industry. That's pretty much ended in the last couple of quarters. So it's kind of getting back to a new baseline and growing. But that's because, on the home front, like I was looking at my Netflix and Hulu and, any other streaming services, right? It's SaaS and subscriptions have become such a huge part of life. There's some SaaS fatigue going on. So I think that's worth recognizing, as this is a process of like, let's find redundancy and cut costs. That's just really been relevant and top of mind for everybody the last few years. Maybe we're starting to pull out of that and say, we could optimize for productivity now, right? things might be changing a little. I think there's another interesting possibility though beyond audit and cancel and consolidate. And this is not sort of advice that I would have given 5 or 10 years ago, but it's a homebrewed solution. So I think there's a lot of pitfalls to building your own solutions for tools that you need. But in the last few years, the kind of renaissance of the low-code, no-code tool builders have started to make it so that you can kind of put together some of the SaaS tools yourself that are becoming commoditized with low-code and no-code tools and a small team of less senior developers. And the trend is just continuing more and more in that direction. And so it is worth considering. Like, I'll give you a quick example. Like, one of the most popular things that people used to buy was like a dashboard, some kind of software. Someone build it for them. You find software where you can create a dashboard, and we're just going to get a view of something. Maybe it's Gainsight for a view of like the customer 360, or it's like I need Salesforce just so I can build a dashboard, just so my sales team can see what's going on. The composability trends in the last few years make that really easy to do yourself. So like AppSmith, for instance, like great tool for taking a bunch of backends and like throwing together custom administrative interfaces for whatever your team is and whatever their visualization needs are, and doing it without really hiring developers, but it's still being your tool that you can build yourself. So just throw that out there as like an increasingly appealing path to take.
Definitely a good take. I like all three of yours. Ray, John, Matt. Thanks for sharing that. I'd love to kind of now we talk about a little something different around the challenges. I'd love to kind of address the fundamental challenge, which I think can really kind of limit this kind of true potential of the connections and integrations, and it's really around data silos. From my side, it's imagine having such a powerful set of tools today that are scattered across your ecosystem, your internal landscape today, and each one of them is holding such a treasure trove of data, and it can be inaccessible to several members of your team, different roles, different teams. You can even think of it from an external perspective if you're working with multiple agencies. And what we're creating right now is this, again, siloed kind of isolated pockets of information that's really kind of hindering us as an organization for having streamlined workflows, understanding comprehensive insights, and really ultimately managing and understanding impactful business decisions. I come at it from a product marketing perspective, and I think of it that these pain points are real. I think of it from fragmented customer journeys. It can be internal journeys as well, but it's the hindering of tooling can help make it issues for you to kind of clearly understand your customers. Really affects the way that you do your effective targeting, personalization, understanding clear customer satisfaction. Also think of it from a collaboration roadblocks perspective. We're seeing these silos creating issues for cross-functional collaboration, slowing down decision-making, hindering innovation tactics as a company. And then lastly, it's around inconsistency and compliance concerns. These not knowing the data, and where it's all located and how one interacts with another is creating, this kind of inaccuracy of understanding what is the center source of data that we should be reviewing. Is it reliable, and does it adhere to kind of our compliance and regulation concerns? Matt, I don't know, if you have a different take or you want to double down, but I'd love to kind of understand kind of common challenges associated with data silos and maybe how we can ensure seamless information flows across disparate platforms.
Yeah, data silos are a problem. I liked you split it into two categories. You said there's internal kind of stakeholders for data, but that also implies there's some external consumers of data, and I think of it in those two ways. So, from the engineer in me, when I'm thinking I'm building an app or my teams are building apps, and they all need to talk to each other, and data silos are a problem for that. there's great tools out there, whether you're using like AppSync or API Gateway from AWS, or like the smaller startups like Atama, where kind of like what John said, pulling it under one umbrella is the idea, but it's from a sort of API perspective. So even though you have 10 CMSs and you've got a CDP and you've got all this other stuff, you can make it feel like it's all one data layer and then build all of your apps off of that. And that can be a really incredible way to kind of reduce complexity and redundancy and just break down the walls between those silos. And you need that more and more as things are becoming more and more decoupled, and like mock architecture and such is becoming more important. Everything's everywhere. So there's definitely a growing trend towards creating these unification layers. The other half of that, so not the external users, but your internal audiences. I hit this all the time when I'm like, I need to know like win-loss or revenue or something about a particular customer that we have. And it's in a million different places, and you send a lot of Slack messages to try to pull something together. I think that things like Domo and Tableau are kind of magical for that. It's also pulling it into one umbrella. And another wrinkle here is it's not just great for usability. You can actually reduce your license fees a lot. Like if you're pulling all your Salesforce data into Domo, and that's where people are looking at it, you don't need so many Salesforce licenses. Right? People don't need to log in. So it's actually a nice way to control cost and tech redundancy. And the last kind of forward-thinking thing is, and Ray, you mentioned AI. I think like this is a huge opportunity for AI. This is like where OpenAI is one of their main revenue streams that they're planning on. Right? They've got ChatGPT. That's great. They've got like the ability to create different models and customize and extend models for your own usage. But the third kind of revenue stream that's really big for OpenAI and why they're worth so many billions is this idea of like enterprise GPTs. So Acquia or FFW has their own GPT, and it's connected to your Confluence and your Jira and every single support ticket that you ever had for any customer. And so if everything's in data silos, you just ask the GPT and it just gives you the answer after searching across them. And it's already something that is available at like kind of a nascent level. You can have an enterprise GPT now. And I think in a few years, that's just going to be the answer for all of this.
Yeah, certainly. It's such an interesting world that we live in now from where we were 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Matt, I appreciate that response. Ray, I've got maybe a pointed question towards you. I feel like you might be able to answer. How can organizations leverage user behavior data to identify areas where tools are overlapping or underutilized?
Sure. A people question. Yeah. I think developing a smart measurement plan is critical to tapping into your user data to determine what the most productive interactions are, what it requires to manage those interactions, and where there may be needless duplication, right? At FFW, we use measurement plans as the basis for experimentation, right? And experimentation is really overlooked. I mean, I think we're no longer consumed, battered by the set it and forget it mentality, right? But it is different when you talk about experimentation as opposed to, a planned increment or waterfall increment, if you will. Experimentation is an aspect of optimization that organizations would benefit from tremendously to contain costs, to manage workflows, and most importantly, to improve user experience. And by starting with measurement plans, teams can implement the kind of analytics that we've been talking about, and monitoring dashboards, which can clearly show overlap, underutilization, and lots of other things. And with AI, that offers even more potential to surface things for questions we haven't even thought of yet. So.
Yeah, thank you. I love the talk around experimentation. I think when experimentation happens, I think change management strategies, what are some change management strategies for ensuring smooth adoption of kind of new integrated workflows? Maybe John and then maybe Ray, you guys have different thoughts or associated thoughts.
Yeah, it's funny because it's almost like a yin and yang. We talk about these wonderful things like AI and dashboards that can give you all this insight, but then on the other hand, there's that balance factor of the human component, and it's something that a lot of companies overlook, especially if they're thinking that there's going to be a cost savings. Fortunately, many agency partners like FFW, provide change management workshops. We can really help outline, what changes are occurring, who needs to be notified because who's going to be impacted, and then mapping out those steps to get everyone on board. If for larger companies, people a lot of times they'll bring on consulting companies that focus just on this area, and then there's also the chief change management officer, new title that's come up in the past couple of years, just because it is such an important thing for companies to look at, especially for larger companies that are bringing on new software, looking at making changes to software and processes, might be purchasing other companies or being bought by other companies. So it's a good thing to be aware of, and look at early before you start making any dramatic changes.
Yeah, I think change management workshops, plural, are an excellent way to, kick off new endeavors. I think we want to frame it uh, as such that we understand it. Most of what we're working in today are technology adoption uh, projects, and that even though they might not be new technology for us, for a lot of the folks that we work with, we're helping them adopt new technology, which involves people, and so having a comprehensive adoption plan is really important. Again, often overlooked. We think about documentation and training, but a broader adoption plan is usually much more a thorough adoption plan is usually much more complex, right? We're currently building out a project for a very large university, a robust technology adoption of a plan, and it includes different, cohorts for different types of folks with different content understandings and skills. And some of it uses traditional user guides and some of it uses recorded training. But then there is a whole cohort of folks that are, don't touch the system very often, but when they do, it's really intense. And so we offer them, workshops where we're applying, the new technology to their particular use cases. And that's the kind of thing that sticks. And then what we do is, we use that group of folks to evangelize the new technology in the broader community, especially in something like a university. And they become, sneezers. And, they talk about, how great, this new thing is. And they can talk authentically about some of the problems that they struggled with, and ideally how their technology partners, Acquia, FFW, the Central University Web Development Office, pivoted in order to adapt to those changes. And so this way, it's not, oh, the technology is no good. It's, oh, the technology is so good they were even able to make this change and accommodate our workflows and our needs. And that's, I think, that's where the rubber hits the road. It's flattening workflows for people and organizations. Talk about optimization, right? It's relieving pain and helping them aspire to new heights.
Yeah, into that point too, I think to do FFW's horn a little bit, bringing in an outside partner like us, is really effective from that aspect. Is that people will be a lot more honest with us than they will be maybe for an internal workshop. And we've gotten really skilled at making sure that the workshops are focused with different groups so people feel comfortable that they can bring up those changes or challenges that they might be facing. And these are important things people need to talk through. That anxiety is going to be there either way. So working through it and finding how the pathway is moving forward collaboratively is super effective.
Yeah, thanks, John and Ray. To double down on something you guys talked about, which is around adoption and kind of effective change management, I'd love to kind of talk what role do internal campaigns play in kind of driving this awareness adoption for integrated best practices within the organization. John, I feel like you've got a thought.
Yeah, the internal champions, and Ray mentioned this too just now, are super important. And one of the ways that we foster that is through, these are the folks that are going through the workshops and looking under the rocks and trying to figure out where there might be hiccups and challenges there. And then these folks become the internal champions. They also become something of the subject matter expert on those areas, or can at least point you in the right direction if somebody else has a question. And most importantly on that too is that they're sharing the success stories. If it's an internal situation, talking about how it made their life easier and sharing that, or if it made it a project more efficient. If it's more of an external facing sales success story, then that'll get everybody excited from the external side. If somebody finds out that a particular tool or change made their sales process easier. And then one caveat to that too is that, as with any organizational change, you really need to make sure that your leadership has been aligned on the changes that are happening and why they're happening. Not everybody's going to be excited about it, but this is not the time for two different leadership people or two different departments to showcase their disagreement. And I feel like everybody speaking here and everybody that's watching has probably been part of those difficult discussions. So before taking those steps to move forward, making sure that that leadership at least has a standardized agreement on what's happening, why it's happening, and are moving forward with it.
Yeah, thank you, John. We were talking about breaking down kind of these data silos and really around the seamless information flow. Topic comes to mind is around security, and I think I'd love to maybe talk about it for a second. It's around integrating these platforms, granting access to sensitive data, and really we want to ensure that this data is protected because it is precious treasures. When we are evaluating these integrations and thinking about security considerations, what should be prioritized to help protect sensitive data?
Yeah, I mean, I could jump. I'll jump in, Garrett. I mean, talk about user experience, right? It's how you can't have good user experience if their users don't know that they are safe and secure and that their stuff is safe and secure. So, I think any solutions that touch sensitive data need to be prioritized, right? And first, of course. I think what we ought to recognize today in particular is that sensitive data shared across APIs is a huge factor, right? Because it's so much big data is being shared, across these APIs, and it's a huge security factor. And we understand as technologists that securing data in transit is obvious, but is the data making any stops along the way, overlooked stops along the way? Is it being used in code? Is it going out to other third parties, tools and services, and who's responsible for what? Who updates what and when? So, and I think when organizations are engaging third-party services, there's a tendency, to rely upon certifications and product sheets, but I think you need to engage with your providers and have human face-to-face, if not in person, conversations. And to understand basics like OWASP top 10. I mean, ask them about policies after a breach, right? I mean, like if we've learned anything, we can talk about preventing a breach, terrific, but breaches do happen. What happens when they do? Having a breach is bad enough, but having sensitive data out there in the wild for months or even years, as the worst case stories come in, is horrible, and there's just no reason for it. So having engaging in conversations with folks. I mean, our clients do. I know we engage in conversations with Acquia on behalf of those factors, that Acquia has a HIPAA service and other secure data services. It's just really essential, and like get beyond those data sheets and those certs, engage in conversations. And the best place to start, when possible, I feel, is a baseline security audit. Right. Now, you can't necessarily do a security audit for every new third party that you bring in, but when you know that there are certain really highly sensitive areas, or proportionately larger share of sensitive data, organizations should consider working with their partners to create POCs, and then trying to break things, and testing that security. And I think it's worth the effort, and nothing devalues your brand more than a breach. So it's worth the investment.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. This isn't necessarily a security session today, so we can dive certainly down the road, or provide more context. But I appreciate you providing some insights. I'd love to quickly talk about integrations, and I started to think to myself, how can organizations balance the need for customization with benefits of standardized pre-built integrations? John, I was going to punt this over to you.
Yeah, I mean that is really the $1 million question, and it's very unique to every company's specific situation. And we've talked about this in some of the earlier questions. Even when deciding whether or not to make a change to a different software or an additional tool, looking at whether or not the stuff that comes out of the box that's pre-built will work, or if you're going to have to do a lot of customization to actually get the data that you need out of it and get it to do what it's supposed to do. Yes, things will generally be cheaper, if you're utilizing all pre-built integrations, but that's not going to mean anything if you're not actually getting what you need out of the tool. Another point is that even a lot of that pre-built integration ends up having to be customized to some degree. It's not always a massive undertaking, but there are tweaks here and there. So to assume everything is going to work pre-built is probably a risk, and probably won't end up being that true in the long run. But really, looking at what you need to get out of those tools, and whether or not the pre-built versus customized will get you there is the biggest question that you have to ask.
Yeah, thank you. I would love, we've dived into this kind of unlocking of the power of integrations and tackling data silo challenges. A crucial question to me starts to emerge, and is how do we ensure the optimized landscape remains resilient and adaptable in this kind of ever-changing digital landscape. I mean, I think about MarTech stack, and it just continues to grow and grow and grow, and our priorities shift and change. And I think the really kind of the answer lies around future-proofing our architecture. And this isn't just about patching things or existing tools together. It's about creating a foundation that anticipates change and embraces our flexibility as an organization, and empowers the agility of an organization. And if I can take the house analogies, we're building a house. We have to have a solid foundation. It's the architecture that really underpins everything. And then I think about the walls that build up a home. It's our adaptivity. Your home will grow as your family grows, as the dog gets added to the family, and as a business perspective, again, your priorities might shift. You might be adding new technology because of the sake of adding a new business function. And then the internal side, you're thinking about the workflows, the plumbing of the house, and how everything is running smoothly from department to working with, again, external agencies or organizations to help, manage and build. So to shift gears, I'd love to kind of explore kind of this critical aspect of building your tech stack for the future. What characteristics kind of help define a future-proof architecture for mapping a complex digital experience or digital tech stack? Matt, do you have a thought there?
Yeah, well, the least important thing is people. I'm just kidding, right? I think it's a relevant topic for the last few years again. Like I'll give you a quick example. It's really kind of goes back to like the beginning of COVID and how a lot of businesses had to undergo rapid transformations unexpectedly. For some, it was a big decrease in business, and for some, it was explosive growth, like the way that Amazon grew, like incredibly. I have a good friend who works in the alcohol business, and they had to pivot from a lot of in-restaurant sales where people are getting wine by the glass from a little pony keg under the bar to direct to customer, because no one's going to restaurants anymore. And the technology implication of that, oh, geez, how do we take orders from customers? We need a website, we need e-commerce, we need some kind of shipping solution. That happened to a lot of companies. And I think that's where the Gartner hype cycle around composability came from. That's where you probably heard of DXC, which like it took me a while to figure out what the heck are they talking about with DXC. I think I get it now. It is around the need to pivot quickly and be nimble because technology changes fast, and we saw that huge upheaval. And so the answer is, or really to put the question differently, how do you future-proof? How do you stay nimble? And DXC is part of an answer to that. And the idea is that I think Gartner's definition is something like, that something is truly composable if you can take like a service provider and take a native capability of theirs and to swap it out with another provider. The idea is that you have a tech stack where you can take any part of it and mix and match at will. So that's where decoupled builders and decoupled front ends and decoupled back ends all come from. It's a little extra work to put them together and keep them running, but when you do need to pivot, you can pivot faster on any one of those items. So I think the answer increasingly for companies is to invest in this kind of architectural approach, where you have a DXC, which means intentional decoupling of different parts of your digital stack. It's not a panacea. There's downsides, and your company kind of has to be a certain size for it to make sense, because you need some developers to keep things running. But if you don't know a lot about DXC and some of like the new, not just headless CMSs, like which is relevant to Drupal, but also the stuff you stick on top of it, like the builders from uniform.dev or builder.io, and the different front-end systems you can swap on top of it, then take a look into it if you're worried about being future-proof.
A great thing to do too, I found, is ask your tech partners and your vendors, what's their roadmap, and if they're worth their salt, they will have at least something to say to that, and have been, keeping pulse on how things are constantly changing and how constantly have to integrate. So, the fact that they have an answer and they're planning for that is a good sign, as well as you're selecting the tools and vendors.
Yeah, some good insights. I have maybe like a final question that I'm going to ask here is, what strategies can, be, employed to help foster a culture of experimentation? Ray, you talked about experimentation before. I would love to talk, within an organization, how can we innovate? Matt, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this. Joined Acquia recently, and like my role now is, I mentioned strategy, but a lot of it is like, hey, how do we shake things up, right? The world is changing quickly. We need to innovate. How can we start thinking innovatively? And so there's a few kind of principles that I've been following and trying to implement recently. One is don't stay in your lane. I think it's really easy to think, this is my job, that's your job, and we're familiar with what we're familiar with, and we're going to keep going. And that really suffocates innovation. I think everyone has to have a sense of, we own the outcomes. We all know who the customer is. We all know what their problems are. We all know enough so that we can have creative ideas about how to solve them. And so another part of that is like, be the user. I always think of like Chevy Chase and Caddyshack, where it's like, be the ball. Like, you actually have to go use your products. It's kind of amazing in a lot of tech companies how many people are in the company and how few of them like install and log in and click around and use the product like a real end user. So you're not going to get innovation if you don't get that. So take that time. I'd also say don't just use your product, go wide. So we recently at Acquia with a couple of our teams, first I wanted to call it a hackathon, and then I renamed it to a discover-a-thon. I was like, okay, don't build anything. Just go try as many solutions as you can in this space. Take screenshots, try to build something quickly, and come back and present back to the group, so we can understand all of the different ways that our problems can be solved. And that's just really good for kind of building up your innovative inventory. You can kind of get inspiration, right? The smartest deal. I think the last one is you got to leave formal room for experimentation. It's really easy, and actually this happened when we were holding Discover-a-thon. I think people can easily say, I got real work to do. My calendar is full. And it's hard to force yourself to take it seriously. No, this is worth the time. It's fun. And so maybe it feels like frivolous, but it's not. And you kind of have to give people permission to say, you're allowed to take this time on your calendar, even though you have a backlog and even though you have deadlines. Like the company, the team, we all acknowledge that this is valuable and worth doing, even if it's not traditional output. And you really have to lead by example for that and carve that time out and show that you're doing it too. So that's what's been working for us, at a cultural innovation level lately.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that, I want to think of it as the mindset, right? We want to have the right space internally that we are celebrating failures as well as the successes within the company. You can't create the change, overnight. It doesn't happen, perfectly each time, but what you're doing is you're learning through the process. You're understanding the risks. You're thinking about that exploration. I think Matt, you said it. It's like setting the time aside. You got to make sure that we are prioritizing this kind of direction. Ultimately, it can be much more proactive internally as we managing teams, as we're looking through our tool sets. I also think about from the process perspective is that you can think at the micro level that gets to the macro perspectives. You're taking mini versions of the experiments to happen first before you take on the huge project and actually implement the entire change. And I think we talked about at the very beginning of today's call, but adding more tech for the sake of testing and learning, or at least the tooling in the sense that we can try to understand what we've got today and how we can leverage the tools to understand the tools. So I love all those kind of processes. I can thank everyone, all of the panelists that, as we've talked through today, your points of view. We've covered a lot of ground today, exploring different strategies on how to, optimize the digital experience ecosystem that we all are managing, our MarTech and tech stacks today. Some key takeaways that I've got, essentially is, how we've identified and eliminating redundancies, how we're essentially leveraging tools and audits to uncover overlapping, functionalities and optimizing our tech stack. We talked about how to, unleash the power of integrations, how we're embracing tools and technologies to unlock seamless, collaboration between platforms. We talked about breaking down silos within an organization. We talked about how we can, build future-proofing architecture around, wanting to be scalable and wanting to be flexible and really try to have good decision-making practices through data. And then we all talked about, experimentation, and innovation, which is, fostering this kind of internal culture as an organization, and how we can, really collaborate and measure these, outgoing outcomes. For me, I just want to remember to everybody is that, or optimizing this kind of digital, ecosystem is an ongoing journey. By following these guidelines that maybe we've talked about today, and talking about, continuously, adapting your approaches, really can help streamline yourselves and being, agile and being efficient and really ready to face this kind of ever-evolving digital landscape. So again, I thank panelists, and I look forward to seeing you all out there over our ever expanding digital landscape.